All right, Marcus, welcome back to the Water Ski Podcast. Thank you for joining me for this slightly different episode from normal. Before we start, I'd like to mention you are the second returning guest. The first one was Coop Didi, where we had a couple of chats, and now you're my second returning guest. So thank you for deciding to do this. Why don't you explain a little bit what we are about to do here?
Well, first, thanks, dude, for having me back on. I'm stoked to be a part of it. Also stoked that we're doing this in a more relaxed environment instead of in a hotel lobby next to the breakfast bar at 10 p.m. But yeah, this is good. So I guess what we're doing here is taking an opportunity to analyze some really good skiers. Look at some of their strengths, look at some of their weaknesses, through our eyes, at least, yours and mine, and try to share that with people to see if there's value, to see if it resonates, to see if we can help others kind of identify some key strengths and weaknesses within some of the top skiers in the world, as well as an amateur member of the Flow Point Method, to see if that can bring value, I guess. I mean,
yeah, that was the idea, sort of like skiers talking about skiers, you know, like see if we see anything and go with that. Thought it was a good different format than I guess the usual one that I've been doing so far, which is how you get into water skiing, a little bit of a journey, and then just random conversation, or not necessarily random, but depends on the guest. I think to explain the format, we're basically we're speaking from literally the other side of the world from each other, but we'll be watching some video of skiers and then just commentating on it, you know, like, and we're gonna try to follow as much as we can a structured way of doing this. So we'll just cover what they do well, what they could do better, maybe. Some of the favorite or most memorable moments we have personally about their skiing, and our opinion on what would be that one thing that could bring these skiers to the next level if they were to do more of that or change something or improve it. So yeah, that's kind of the structure we'll be following for each skier.
I like it.
Which, by the way, it's also a fairly decent way of reflecting on your own skiing. Always start with what you're doing well, what you see well, then what you could do better, and how you would go about changing the things that you need to do better. So we're gonna try to do our own reflections on this group of skiers. So Marcus, who do we have?
So first, before we get started, I just want to kind of bolster what you just said, and that is, I hope that we can, through this process, help people identify what the key fundamentals are, which is a big that's a big factor in being able to improve your own skiing. So if you don't know what the fundamentals are that govern water skiing, in other words, if you don't know what the basics are, the shortest distance between you and a better performance, then you're taking shots in the dark, and you can be duped, you can be sidetracked, you can go down the wrong rabbit hole, if you will. So I hope we can help people identify, based on these common skiers that we all have seen ski many times, like this first one, Brooke Baldwin, who's a phenomenal skier. I hope we can help people see some of those fundamentals.
Yeah, I mean, right, Brooke, what a skier.
Here we go. So can you see that?
What? Yes. So Mastercraft Pro, right?
Mastercraft Pro. And your viewers cannot see this, your listeners rather, but so we're going to try to keep this as radio friendly as possible, correct?
Yeah, that's the goal.
So what we're watching, what we're seeing is Brooke running 38 off at the Mastercraft Pro this fall. And one of the things that, I don't know, Matteo, maybe you want to start. One of the strengths that you think she does really well, and you can kind of direct me where you want me to stop this.
Yeah, maybe let the pass run a little bit.
Okay, we'll let it run.
So one of the things that, you know, like, we can discuss whether reaching low is a good or a bad thing, or it's compensating for another maybe issue before. But what strikes me with her is that she's probably the female skier that does it the most, right? So when I think of Andy, Will, Nate, they all reach fairly low, and she's probably the skier that does it the most out of the female skiers currently on the tour. And it seems to me that also she's very well balanced on her ski at the end of turns, right? Maybe that turn we just watched wasn't a particularly great example, but she generally tends to ride the ski very well. So I'll be curious to hear from you, like if those two things are connected.
Yeah.
So reaching low and...
I definitely think they are. What I would say is, you're right. She's always very well balanced at the end of the turn. She's more of like a finesse or a touch skier, in my opinion, if that makes sense, in that she doesn't ever really load hard right out of the buoy. She doesn't kind of fall away from the boat and fall into a hard load. And I think maybe that comes from being a grade 3 eventer. Maybe, you know, that's seems to always be a connection between touch skiers on the slalom course and 3 eventers.
Yeah, I think I was talking about it with Elizabeth like a couple of episodes ago. There's kind of like that thing about, particularly if you have a strong trick background, like conversation about balance or where you feel like your feet are in relation to the ski or to your center of mass. It's everyday conversation, right?
Yep.
In trick skiing.
Yep.
So I believe like in slalom skiing, we're talking more and more about this. And I think those who have a strong trick background can resonate very well with like, you know, stance and balance on the ski and where your feet are compared to the ball. And I know we'll be talking about that later with another video, but certainly that seems to be something that Brooke is very, very much aware of, you know?
Yes, for sure. So I guess one thing I want to talk about that you mentioned is the reaching low. Yeah. So can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you very well.
So what happens when people, there's 2 planes you can talk about reaching low. We'll talk about the reaching forward later. But when we talk about reaching low, I think what people need to understand, in my opinion at least, is what reaching low, approaching the buoy does is it keeps the force vector. Imagine you have control of where the rope, what point, how high on the body the rope is pulling on you. In other words, you can have the rope, if your arm is straight out like she is right here, the rope, you just draw a straight line and the rope is basically essentially pulling through her shoulder right there. Okay, and if you can back this up a little bit to this point, you draw a straight line from the rope and you see it's essentially as if she's connecting, in this point in time, she's connecting the rope to the lower part of her body. Does that make sense a little bit?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
So then what happens is we know, we just know like intuitively that this right here is a shorter lever than when you have the rope connected to your shoulder. So essentially what you're doing by connecting the rope lower on the body, meaning by reaching low, is you're limiting the boat's ability or the rope's ability to tip you to the inside early. Yep. So what happens is by reaching low, you can control the rate of the swing of the ski outbound. Is essentially, in my opinion, what reaching low is really, really good for. So you watch Brooke as the ski swings out, you know, she starts to reach low, and as she starts to reach low, that's when the ski starts to track outbound. She is able to rise up over the ski, which is also another really good thing that she does, is she comes into the buoy very over her feet, just much like you and Elizabeth discussed in your podcast with her about feeling pressure through your feet and having your feet underneath you instead of having your feet out in front of you. I think that's what reaching low does for her.
Yeah, no, I think you connected it very well. And this shot, particularly that we're watching from shore of her offside turn, really shows it well. You know, like the ski goes outbound, but it doesn't go outside of the buoy line too soon to where, you know, a short line, we know that's not the best strategy. But as it gets outside of the buoy line, she's completely over her feet and in control of the ski.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I think those are strong points of her. What do you think is one of the things that she could do better?
Okay, so let's go back to the boat view. One of the things I think she could do a lot better, well, what I like to show is that reach into two ball that we just talked about, that low
Yeah.
reach. And you can see it from the boat too. That low reach right there allows her to stand over her ski, but not let the ski go out too far. But I want to point something out that I think she could probably do better, and she probably already knows this. You watch on every offside cut, she's really stacked, by the way. I think Brooke, for the most part, might be one of the most technically sound skiers. I think if she just honestly, if she just had a little bit more grit, and I hope she doesn't get mad for me saying that, but if she just had a little more grit, she would be a force on the slalom course, like hanging on to a few more things. Maybe we'll see that next year, but her technique is some of the best. And you see right through the wakes behind the boat, she's always really stacked and tall. One thing though that happens on her offside cut is she pulls long. And one indication of that is you can always tell when you first see the top of the ski. And this, of course, it changes based on how high the camera angle is, but you don't see the top of Brooke's ski, meaning you don't see her get to the flat position before the new edge until outside the white water at 38 off. That's a really long pull. And as a result, even though she's really good at standing over her ski, you see the water always breaks really far forward on Brooke's ski going into her onside turn. It still doesn't matter because she has too much speed, period. Too much, she swung too far by pulling too long through the whitewater into her onside. The reason she probably does that is because it's safe and she knows she can always end up getting a turn out of it. But you see how far past the buoy she is and how much slack she gets. It kind of happens at
That's right.
38 and
That's
short.
it's a little bit down course one ball at 38 for a left foot forward, and for someone who's that stacked into the gate. That's right.
So
Now,
watch into the offside. Watch her onside cut. She gets plenty of acceleration, and this happens, I think, quite often for her. And you see her already stopping the cut, and you can see the top of her ski through just past the second trough, going into her offside turn. And what that means is she's confident enough that she has enough speed here and momentum that she can swing out to the wide point without having to pull any longer. And as a result, even though she's not as stacked over her ski into this side, she almost always has a tighter turn, even though there's a little bit of a hiccup. And I don't want to get into that now, but you see the ropes just a little tighter out of that turn than it was on her heel side, good side turn.
yeah.
And it happens
it's
throughout the
interesting.
course.
It's interesting because you said something about her onside cut, namely like she trusts the speed that she generated into the wakes to let the ski, roll on the other, like starting to roll on the other edge. Something that probably she's not doing as well on her offside pull. But it's interesting because to me, like if you work properly into the wakes, meaning you accelerate and you're stacked, the only way in which you pull long, the way I see it, is you have to almost create a double pull, right? So you get to the wakes and then you just sort of, lean again away from the boat in an effort to generally getting space to the next ball. As you said, maybe being safe and knowing that you're going to trust your onside turn afterwards. But I don't know, like she looks really stacked into the first wake in that gate offside pull that you showed me. So I wonder if it's like set up or maybe she's not fast enough despite the stack. I don't know.
Well, what I would say is nobody has really done a great job of, other than just saying that if you have an ideal stack into the wakes, an ideal cut, and you have enough momentum, that the edge change is just going to happen naturally, which I think is wrong. I don't agree with that. Nobody, short of that, nobody's done a stellar job explaining what we do as skiers to initiate the finish of the cut or the beginning of the transition. Nobody's really, but innately we just know. She's been skiing since she was probably like 2, so she just knows. She's like, okay, if I want to keep cutting, she knows what to do. Like, I know what you're saying, because it's totally true that she probably has enough momentum right here at center line on that gate cut at 38 off to be able to get to swing out to full width to get around the buoy. But for some reason, she just doesn't trust it. So she maintains lean a little too long. And that's what gets her too much momentum, which it shows itself in the form of down course speed. And you can see with a little bit of a loose line how she has to make it up and do her signature heel side turn, which she's really good at. But to run 39, she can't pull that long and get away with it very often.
Yeah, because then the next acceleration point keeps delaying as she is further up on the boat later. Good points. Now, going to most memorable moment. Do you have one for Brooke?
I will back up. Sorry, I do want to say something. She could get away with this. She could get away with this pulling long if she just like got the eye of the tiger and just like cranked the crap out of the buoys. You know what I mean? Like, watch Regina. Regina pulls long often, but she engages the shovel, the ski, and then she's able to rotate the ski with a lot of muscle. And if Brooke was able to do that at 38 and 39, she could get away with this. I'm just thinking moving in the direction of skiing better and trying to elucidate what is the best approach to slalom skiing. Obviously, you don't need to pull any longer than you have to, and she's holding that cut too long, in my opinion.
Yeah. The way you said it seemed like an adjustment of a problem that happened before. Yeah.
Yep. Most memorable for me was when she ran 39. I think she was the youngest skier to ever run 39, 10.75.
Yeah.
For all you Euros, sorry.
I would say the same. I wasn't there. I just saw, I think it was one at 41. I just remember seeing Brooke Baldwin, and I knew she was young. Like, I don't think she was 18 yet.
No.
I might be wrong on this. And yeah, 1 at 41. It was one of those scores that we've seen more and more often from younger skiers that, in my opinion, like, make you rethink about what's possible. You know, like,
sure,
13-year-old tricking 10, Pato Font, not even 20 years old, tricking 12. You know, like, it's one of those things where you go, okay, where the sport is going up, you know?
I agree.
And
I think historically, you said it, historically, trick skiing has been where, like, Patrice back in the day was like 14 and, you know, competing with the best, or maybe 13, I don't know. But tricks historically has been, you know, like Pato, where the youngest could also compete with the best. And I think Brooke kind of maybe showed how in slalom that could be the case as well. The youngest can sometimes, you know, ski to the top echelon of what a human's capable of. So,
yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. I agree. Definitely one of the first in slalom. Maybe the only precedent that I can think of that was like very, very big was CP, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
So last thing for Brooke, what would be one of the things that would bring her skiing to the next level? Do you think we covered it?
I think so, in my opinion. She does so much right that, for me, there's two things. Number one, not holding the cut so long into this onside turn. Because what happens is she ends up hitting that bump. She ends up holding her cut a little bit longer than she needs to. And she ends up with more speed than she needs to outbound. Even though she does a great job of setting up the turn better than most other skiers, it always almost ends up in slack. So that's the one thing I would say. The other thing, if I go back to this boat view, is every time she approaches this offside turn, she almost never gets the water breaking as far forward as she does on her onside. So you see the water's never really that far forward. It's like at her front toe. And what happens is that's creating a slightly inward component towards the boat that also pushes her a little bit more narrow than she would be. But more than that, unlike on her onside, she doesn't have the ability to make the move that I call that stivot turn, or that tail slide, that tail smear, to push through the back leg to get the tail to move on your offside. If you're already on your back foot coming into that turn, before you start the smear, you can't push through your back foot anymore without either falling off the back or engaging the front instantaneously. And she chooses to engage the front here to get the tail to move. And that oftentimes results in an unstable turn. And you see it right there. Whereas on this onside approach, she's really good at getting her body over her feet. And you see where the water's breaking. The water's literally breaking like 6 inches ahead of her front toe.
Yep.
So what
Which
that does
is kind of like opposite to usual, you know, like you would generally see, you know, like a little bit less, the water breaking a little bit earlier on your onside and further forward on your offside.
I agree. She's like an anomaly in that. She's a special case in that regard. But her and Nate are the two best, and I think, in the world at doing this into the onside. And it's why she has the potential to have the best onside, because she's so stacked over her front foot that when she's ready to let the ski swing out and start to load through the tail of the ski, and essentially it's a rock back move to get the tail to smear, she has room to do it because she's starting from a forward position.
There it is.
She's already forward right there, and then she can throw her legs or her weight through her back leg to get the tail to smear. You can't do that on your offside or on any side if you don't come into it with your weight over your front foot, because that front foot to back foot transfer of weight is the thing that is required to get the tail to smear, short of having a ski that can do two different things. And I know some ski companies out there are claiming that they've got the ski or that they're working on it, but as of now, nobody, in my opinion, has a ski that will do that for you. So you've got to learn mechanically how to get your body stacked coming into the buoy so that then you can load through the tail of the ski and get the tail to smear without falling off the back.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
I mean, those points make a lot of sense to me, and it is a bit of an anomaly in that regard. But I did notice what you were saying in terms of like approaching to the onside. She looks a lot like Nate looks into his 2-4, like balance on like with the center of mass right in between his feet, slightly on the front foot, which gives her the room of like engaging the tail whenever, like letting the tail smear whenever she needs to. Even if she ends up pulling a little long. I guess more simply, and I know a lot of movements are consequences of, you know, loading and intensity and balance, but even at earlier passes, I just see Brooke doing a lot of movement, you know, which I personally like. It pleases the eye, you know. I like someone that has a lot of like individual style, but to me, I've got to realize that the more movement, the more chances for error, right? So it seems to me that like if she could limit the range of certain movements, maybe that would help her be, I guess, more consistent, both in terms of scores and in the way she's trying to ski, which again, to me is extremely impressive. I mean, any of the videos we selected are impressive, but I think that if she could like just limit the range of motion on certain movements, that could certainly help her be more consistent.
I tend to agree. What I will say to that is you're exactly right. And what I think is when you see somebody who's really good, when you see a magician who's really good, they're obviously moving and doing things with their hands that you don't really see, but they're moving a lot more than other people who aren't doing something with their hands. So that's a bad analogy, but if you watch Nate, for instance, you don't tend to see a lot of movement, but he is moving a lot. He's just doing it in a rhythm and in a timing that fits with the boat, like we talked about before. And I think to your point, she's a little out of sync with her movements. It would be my guess. You would tend to think maybe she needs to move a little less overall. I think somewhere in the middle would be a good compromise if she could get her timing down on her length of cut and on when she makes her moves.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think like as her timing improves, I think some of the extra movement would take care of themselves.
Yeah. Hey, just two things. Number one, what I want to say is big thanks to the Water Ski Broadcast Company. I just took this video from the Mastercraft Pro. They did a kick-ass job all year with the webcast. So just want to shout out to them, Vince and the team, Tony. I'm using their stuff here for the purposes of review. So it's great footage and I'm stoked to be able to use it. Also, the other thing I didn't say at the outset was I think two things to keep in mind when you're talking about water skiing. There's the positional stuff. There's the shape that your body is in at certain times in the course, but really just the shape of your body and how you're accepting loads at a given moment. And then there's the dynamics of everything. And you just kind of touched on that, Matteo. It's like you can have the right movements, or sorry, you can have the right positions, but if you're not using them at the right times, then you're not nailing the dynamics of how to water ski. You're not nailing the rhythm and the timing. And we know that if you're off rhythm, then things get hard. But we know that if you're on rhythm, but the way the shapes you put your body in, if those are off, then things are going to be hard too. You've got to nail body position at the right place at the right time. You got to nail the timing. And so those two things I think are key fundamentals in just
I agree.
how you approach skiing.
And I think in a chat that we had for the Flow Point Method podcast, I remember telling you that I personally feel I spend so much time focusing on the body positioning that now I'm really focused on my own skiing on dynamics, but I have to make sure that I don't do it at the expense of body position, right? So it's a balance that it's not easy to keep.
For sure.
Okay, I see you already switched to our next skier, Allie Nicholson.
Yeah.
Also left forward.
Yep. Same tournament, 38. She ran this tailwind, I believe. So
okay.
We're just going to run it through slow-mo if you want. And you can talk as you see something. Already, I can see she's tough as nails. She pulled so hard through the gates.
Yeah.
But she can handle it.
Yeah, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but we chose her and Brooke because of their different styles. Like we can already see that see even just this offside pull, she's stacked, but for instance, she has a bit more like leg motion than what Brooke has, right?
Sure. Exactly.
Different balance on the ski into the ball. But what I do see, and maybe you'll correct me, what we were talking about with Brooke as not seeing the top of the ski early enough, right? So it's an indication of pulling long. With Allie, I don't see that. Like I see ski coming off the spray, top of the ski. Here, crossing the wakes. Maybe, here I think she was a little late into six ball, but
yeah, she was.
Up until now, it looked like, holding on to slack, six.
She's tough. Let's just say she's tough. If Allie wasn't as tough as she is, I think this would be a different story as far as skiing goes. But you're right, I think. As far as this cut right here through the gates, she gets a little bit more compressed. She's working her legs more, and I think she's working too hard, honestly. But I want to get to that after the good. So what would you say is one of her strengths? You think that transition? Because I would almost say the opposite, but I don't want to counter what you're saying.
So again, I think. Well, you can counter what I say. I would say the transition might not be the cleanest, but in terms of timing, she seems to me a little bit more consistent.
For sure.
Consistent. That's what I think. And I think it's a strength. I think it's, sometimes the so-called hits the fan and you have to be able to still ski. Right.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that still allow you to get down the pass, even if you're not into the course in the best shape, is precision in when you roll the ski on the other edge of the second wake. And it seems to me this is a good pass to see that, because even though it wasn't the cleanest 38 that Allie's ever run, she's keeping precision in that aspect of her skiing. And I know just by skiing with her and knowing her that's one of the things she does the best.
I would agree. Precision is key. And I think that's a good word because in my opinion, her biggest strength is her ability, like we talked about earlier with Brooke, to always land on her feet at the finish of the turn, no matter how loose the line gets. So she doesn't ever fall off the ski, and she is always able to land back on her feet and accelerate into the wakes, no matter how bad the turn is. And you see that on both sides. You see her come in, turn late at 2-ball, get the ski to stop and rotate. And even though it jumps way out of the water, she's able to land back on her feet before the whitewater to accelerate. But what I will say is Allie probably is the longest puller of any top level women's skier. And she's transitioning every time at the same time. But Matteo, look at this. She's outside the whitewater and you still can't see the top of her ski into one. And it happens into every side. You watch this again. She's outside the whitewater. She's probably almost outside buoy line. And you just finally see the top of her ski. And it's probably one of the quickest transitions, which is a necessity of pulling that long. But in my opinion, that's the one thing that I think she could improve on. And I know I'm doing this in reverse because we're supposed to highlight a good thing. But that is the biggest deficiency, I think, in her own skiing is not trusting the ability to transition earlier. Because she's literally pulling her acceleration phases all the way from whitewater past the second whitewater. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. Do you think part of it is caused by, like, if you go back to that onside cut, like a bit of like collapsing on her back leg, like outside of the wakes and into the wakes? So into the wakes and outside of the wakes? Because what I find is if you're collapsing on your legs, and this comes from probably the world champ of squatting on the wakes, it takes time to stand back up on the ski. Like, I mean, I think part of the reason why those who squat a lot transition quick is also because you're sort of like, it's quicker to stand up. But again, we're talking about a deficiency and how to adjust to it. It's almost like inevitable. Like, it's easier to stand up on the ski and then get your feet underneath you as you get off the ball.
I agree, but I think it goes back to this right here. You look at her gate cut. We'll see Freddie Winter later, and Freddie Winter is running 39, and he's like half as leaned away from the boat. He's working like half as hard as Allie. And so this is nothing against Allie. It's actually, I'm amazed at how strong and how tough she is. And it's more like, I feel like if she could back off the intensity into the wakes on this phase, into center line, the downswing, then I feel like she could trust from center line out, that upswing, she could trust to start the transition sooner and control it better. And then she wouldn't have this excessive speed. I get what you're saying at the backside of one right here, but she's still advancing on the boat when she's trying to turn back in, which that's indicated by all the slack right here on the right of the screen. And there's just no way around that, short of doing some Houdini act. There's no way around getting out of this without an ugly turn. And then, like you said, now you're in a compromised position. You don't start accelerating until the whitewater. So then you have to shift your acceleration phase towards the next ball just to get the width that you need. And then you're on that bad rhythm. The problem is some people are so good at doing that, like Allie, that she just makes it work. And it's pretty amazing to watch, especially in this tailwind. She's one of the only skiers to run this direction from the first half of that round, I think. So
so this is round one of the Mastercraft Pro, right?
Yep. The thing she does good, in my opinion, and I want to say this and I'll let you kind of identify yours, is right here through the actual transition where the ski goes from the cutting edge to the turning edge, she does not get compressed. And I think what's good about that is that allows her to swing outbound more against the rope. We'll talk about that later. I want to bring that up with your example and maybe with when we talk about Freddie Winter. But that is a strength of hers, is that she gets compressed, but she doesn't get compressed as much through the transition. You see right here, to actually transition.
She's actually standing up.
She's making
this during the transition.
She's making the ski stand her up. And what that does is that slows the transition down and it keeps the rope tight all the way through the part where she's making the ski squeeze underneath her. Whereas other skiers, like Manon, for instance, you see Manon compressed through that transition phase, much like I did when I was skiing. And what that does is that allows the ski, if you unweight and you stay compressed through the transition, that allows the ski to shoot not only away from the boat, but in front of you too much. And now you're in a situation where you're only relying on momentum because now you're no longer swinging around the pylon. Whereas Allie, from this point right here, all the way out to here, just before she lets go with two hands, she is literally using energy from the boat because she's not lost her platform. She's standing through her feet. She's making the ski stand her body up away from the water, which we used to think was bad, but we know is good now because we'll get into it later. But that, to me, is her biggest strength right there. She stays so much more connected than a lot of people through that transition phase, even though it happens way too late.
Yeah. Yeah. And look how
what do you see?
I mean, you made me notice this thing about the transition, which is really interesting. Like, I never noticed this about her, how she's actually letting the boats, look, this is so clear here, like making her stand up onto the ski. Because you can, like, if I see her cut, I'm like, her balance and her stance into the ball is going to be badly compromised. But then you go forward a few frames and you see her approaching this offside turn, and she's, in my opinion, like well balanced and on the ski.
Yep.
So yeah, it's funny how if you start looking at, slow-mo and really looking at details, you see like things start to get interesting. Now, as far as my most memorable moment with Allie was last year.
Yep.
And you probably remember this moment. We had just released the Omega, and we had a little chat over the phone, you and I, where you basically told me, I don't care how good you're skiing, you're jumping on the Omega and you ski. And I had a record tournament 2 days later, and Ali showed up, having received kind of the same conversation. I don't know if it was from you or from Will. And I believe second round, nailed 3.5 at 39 and hit her PB. Looking, looking really good, really solid. And honestly, again, it's no offense, but it seemed to me that with a bit of grit and actually making the decision of zigzagging before going to 4 rather than after making sure that the ski was out of 4, she would have gotten 4 at 39, which is the big score.
Yeah.
And I think that was memorable to me because, we were in the same situation, like new ski, maybe 2 sets on it, record tournament, granted at a great site, but, it's still 2 sets on the ski.
Yeah.
And she killed it.
I love that story. Mine was also last year, but it was at Collegiate Nationals when she had injured her ankle just like right before the event. I think her front ankle. And she couldn't even really walk on it. And her attitude is always stellar. I mean, if she's pissed for like 2 seconds. And then she's just like, all right, pick myself up. Here we go. Live to ski another day. So she had that attitude going into the tournament. Didn't even know she's going to be able to ski. Went out and almost ran 38, I think. She should have ran 38. She had it. Anyway, let me think. 28, 32, 35. 38, yeah, I don't think she ran it. But nonetheless, she went out, got a score for her team, compromised potentially her safety, and actually skied really well, and just had a killer attitude about it, which in the college scene is a little easier to keep because it's more about the team. But at the same time, she kind of is a star in that world, so she could have totally just been like, oh, this sucks, like my last nationals, why couldn't I, have had a better opportunity? And she wasn't. She was super, super cool, calm, collected, and just somebody that you really admire because she's not, she doesn't get lost in water skiing. She realizes its place in her life, and especially in the collegiate scene, how much more important it was to go out and get a score for her team than it was to go out and get a score for her ego. So that was cool for me to get to see.
Yeah, no, I mean, you nailed it. Great attitude. And I think you can have that attitude and still take your craft seriously, and if there was a good example about that balance, I think Allie is that example.
I agree. Technique, equipment, fitness, nutrition, mindset, the 5 components to success on the water. Our mission from the beginning has been to figure out how to help you become the best skier you can be. To do that, we've studied every single aspect of this sport and simplified it into the most fundamental concepts so that you don't have to. The Flowpoint Method is the first and only all-inclusive program with the best information and tools to help you become the best skier you can be. Sign up today for a free trial and see for yourself.